Maybe I'm wrong, but Koji, he's completely mistaken, or more precisely, Jippo's weakness has now been revealed. Yeah, I'm Nim without an E. Please allow me at least 8 minutes to talk about Chapter 27. Whether you like this video or not, I still really appreciate all of you guys. Love you. So yeah, I'm sure we've all seen the one-panel spoiler for Chapter 27, showing a scene that's truly unexpected. I mean, Jura has really come back to Konoha for the third time. First, he came with Hidari. Second, he suddenly came to the bookstore and bought some books. And third, as in Chapter 27, he was really sitting relaxed while enjoying dango and a glass of tea in his hand. However, before we get into the main point, I want you to not overlook a part that I think is very interesting and worth considering. Yeah, it is what it is. First, judging from Shikamaru and Inojin's expressions, it seems like Jura arrived unexpectedly. I mean, there are 3 possibilities for how Jura arrived in Konoha. First, he entered through the main gate of Konoha village. Second, he flew in and landed like a typical villain. Third, he left several claw marks inside Konoha village. But if it was actually claw marks, then Konoha is truly in danger in the future. And as we know, in the first chapter, Kawaki destroyed some claw marks that had appeared in Konoha village. But I'm sure the code isn't that easy to create at points that are easy to find. That means there are some hidden points that he created around Konoha village. However, that's still not necessarily true, because in fact, Jura may have recreated the claw marks inside Konoha village, or even the remains of the claw marks created by Hidari when fighting Sarada and Boruto. But for the sake of Konoha village's safety, Shikamaru, being a genius, strategic, and very cautious, would not allow a single claw mark to exist within Konoha village, because aside from the Divine Tree humans, Code can also access that claw mark. However, at this point, which of the 3 possibilities do you think makes the most sense, guys? Second, do you think this leak is the beginning of Chapter 27, or is it actually the end of Chapter 27? But if I may guess, this Chapter 27 leak is the end. In other words, this should be the last page before Mamushi attacks. Logically, Chapter 27 will continue the serious conflict between Sarada, Damon, and Sumire. At this point, even though the conflict between Damon and Sarada isn't really dangerous, urgent, or anything like that, at least Ikemoto won't leave this important part hanging for the second time. Yeah, I know this might sound like I'm being a know-it-all or something, but by showing Jura suddenly appearing in the middle of Konoha village, this should prove that the conflict is still in Konoha village itself. Because once again, after Jura enters Konoha village, the sensor team will definitely detect Jura's chakra entering their range, and they will immediately report Jura's arrival to Shikamaru. So it makes perfect sense if this is the scene before Mamushi's arrival in Konoha. But what do you guys think? Third, this is still about Jura, but more precisely, what is he actually planning? Apart from the assumptions and theories I've mentioned and some fan speculation, have you ever thought of something even crazier than the scene showing Jura casually sitting with a glass of tea and dango in his hand? I mean, Ikemoto could create a drama or plot twist that you'd never thought of. Moreover, the stories of Naruto and Boruto are not the same or similar, but rather the opposite. Yeah, not entirely, but with some evidence that has been revealed, I think this could happen. So let me explain it first until it's finished. At this point, we have to admit that Jura is a villain that no one in Konoha can defeat, right? And of course, Koji himself is the singularity of fate who sees that absolute fact through Jippo. And we also know that Jura's first arrival in Konoha cost the lives of several Konoha Junin and caused damage to the village. And after it was revealed that Shikamaru finally knew Boruto's ally, Koji, he gave an order, or more precisely, a warning not to provoke Jura. In other words, Jura's arrival at this moment is something that I think cannot be wasted. Simply put, this is the right time to at least befriend Jura or start a conversation with him. But, disclaimer, this is not a negotiation, and it's also not about what you guys think. But once again, let me finish first. As far as Chapter 26 is concerned, especially with the outcome of the fight between Kawaki and Jura, we find one meaning that I think is important. Yep. Aside from Jura focusing on the topic of love, Jura admits that after Kawaki praised him, Jura gave a pretty good response. In other words, Jura wants to talk more with them. So at this point, we can conclude that Jura just wants to talk. But the big question is, who will be his conversation partner in Konoha right now? Kawaki again? Or even some of the Konoha elders? Yeah, I know this sounds ridiculous, especially having to talk to an entity like Jura, but we need to consider these 2 things. Jura won't do anything terrible to Konoha if no one provokes him. Second, Jura just wants to talk. Regardless of who his conversation partner is, this should serve as a bridge or understanding towards a better future that isn't just conflict and battle. Or at least Konoha can show him a better meaning or perspective about this world. By showing him that life evolves along with the end of life, this will open Jura's mind more deeply that life is not only about growing achievements. That way, Jura will gain another perspective on this world and will realize that life is much bigger and evolving as part of it, but in the right way, not in the wrong way, such as destroying it. Then, will the end result make Jura a better person, and so on. And I think this is another plot twist. Betrayal is a common thing. In other words, either Jura will betray in the end, or he will be the victim of betrayal. Because surely, Ikemoto and Kishimoto will create a plot twist that you would never have thought of before. Like Black Zetsu, for example. Yeah, you know what I mean, right? But in the end, this is just a theory and analysis. However, if you have arguments to refute this theory, let me know in the comments. Oh yeah, if you want to check out the source of this idea, you can pause the video here. However, after observing this leak more closely, I think I found something that I find very strange. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it, but what is certain is that it has something to do with Jura, Jippo Kashin Koji, and Mamushi. We know that the second part of Koji's notice was Mamushi's arrival, right? After Boruto destroyed the scenario Koji had created to steer the future in a better direction, Boruto managed to solve the problem by saving Moegi and Shinki. But in the worst case scenario, Mamushi will be the one to make a move. Even in chapter 26, Koji said again that he would give the actual time when he would appear. Well, I mean, couldn't Koji see that Jura was also coming to Konoha? And did Koji also know what Jura's real plan was? At this point, I think there's something strange, because Koji should have not only told Shikamaru about Mamushi coming to Konoha, but also about Jura. Is that right? But if Koji actually missed the prophecy about Jura's arrival, that shouldn't be possible. However, if we assume that Jura's arrival in Konoha was beyond Jippo's vision, then it's highly possible that this Shinjutsu ability has a cooldown. But does that sound silly and illogical? Because if that's not the reason, then why did Koji only notice Mamushi's arrival in Konoha? He even mentioned the prophecy about Mamushi's movement toward Konoha twice. So in other words, can we assume this as Jippo's own weakness? Because honestly, if the Shinjutsu user is a cyborg, it makes sense that the power would have certain limits, which would naturally differ if it belonged to an actual Otsutsuki. But honestly, I've been trying to find a logical reason behind this, and so far, I haven't found the answer. What do you guys think? But the point is, this also serves as additional evidence that chapter 27 hasn't fully covered a whole week yet, meaning it's still not the time for Mamushi to arrive. Yeah, I think that's all we can discuss for this brief spoiler of chapter 27, but if you have other theories, let's chat in the comments. So yeah, thanks for watching, like and subs, I'm Nim without E, see you in the Boruto spoiler part 2. Bye bye. Data bio.